How much do they increase dopamine? Well, let's take a look at some typical things that people do out there or ingest out there that are known to increase dopamine. So let's recall that you have a baseline level of dopamine and that everybody does. Your level of dopamine has everything to do with those genetics, but also with what you've experienced in the previous days and the previous months and so on. When you do or ingest certain things, your levels of dopamine will rise above baseline transiently. And depending on what you do or ingest, it will rise either more or less. And it will be very brief or it'll last a long time. So let's take a look at some of the typical things that people take and do and eat. Some are good for us, some are not good for us. And let's ask how much dopamine is increased above baseline. Chocolate. They didn't look at milk versus dark chocolate, but chocolate will increase your baseline level of dopamine 1.5 times. Okay, so it's a pretty substantial increase in dopamine. It's transient. It goes away after a few minutes or even a few seconds. I'll explain what determines the duration in a minute. But 1.5 times for chocolate. Sex. Both the pursuit of sex and the act of sex increases dopamine 2 times. So it's a doubling above baseline. Now, of course, there's going to be variation there, but that's the average increase in baseline dopamine caused by sex. Nicotine, in particular, nicotine that is smoked, cigarettes, and so increases dopamine 2.5 times above baseline. So there's a peak that goes up above baseline 2.5 times higher. It is very short-lived. Anyone who's ever been a chain smoker or observed a chain smoker understands that the increase in dopamine from nicotine is very short-lived. Cocaine will increase the level of dopamine in the bloodstream 2.5 times above baseline. And amphetamine, another drug that increases dopamine, will increase the amount of dopamine in the bloodstream 10 times above baseline. A tremendous increase in dopamine. Exercise. Now, exercise will have a different impact on the levels of dopamine depending on how much somebody subjectively enjoys that exercise. So if you're somebody who loves running, chances are it's going to increase your levels of dopamine 2 times above your baseline, not unlike sex. People who dislike exercise will achieve less dopamine increase or no increase in dopamine from exercise. And if you like other forms of exercise like yoga or weightlifting or swimming or what have you, again, it's going to vary by your subjective experience of whether or not you enjoy that activity. All right. So for instance, the pen that I'm holding right now, it's one of these Pilot V5s. I love these Pilot V5s. They don't sponsor the podcast. I just happen to like them. I like the way that they write, how they feel. If I spent enough time thinking about it or talking about it, I could probably get a dopamine increase just talking about this Pilot V5. And that's not because I have the propensity to release dopamine easily. It's that as we start to engage with something more and more, and what we say about it and what we encourage ourselves to think about it has a profound impact on its rewarding or non-rewarding properties. Now, it's not simply the case that you can lie to yourself and you can tell yourself, I love something, and when you don't really love it, and it will increase dopamine. But what's been found over and over again is that if people journal about something or they practice some form of appreciation for something, or they think of some aspect of something that they enjoy, the amount of dopamine that that behavior will evoke tends to go up. So for people that hate exercise, you can think about some aspect of exercise that you really enjoy. However, I will caution you against saying to yourself, I hate exercise, or I hate studying, or I hate this person, but I love the reward I give myself afterward. Rewards given afterward actually make the situation worse. They won't make you like exercise more or studying more. They actually will undermine the dopamine release that would otherwise occur for that activity. There are activities that we can do that will give us healthy, sustained increases in dopamine, both the peaks when they happen and to maintain or even increase our baseline levels of dopamine. So how do we do that? In recent years, there's been a trend toward more people doing so-called cold exposure, in part This was popularized by Wim Hof, the so-called Iceman, getting into cold showers, taking ice baths, exposing oneself to cold water of various kinds can in fact increase our levels of dopamine as well as the neuromodulator norepinephrine. What temperature of water you can tolerate will depend on how cold water adapted you are and how familiar you are with the experience of getting into cold water. Please remember this, that when you experience something or you crave something really desirable, really exciting to you, very pleasurable, what happens afterwards is your baseline level of dopamine drops. Okay, so these peaks in dopamine, they influence how much dopamine will generally be circulating afterward. And you might think, oh, a big peak in dopamine, after that, I'm going to feel even better because I just had this great event. Not the case. What actually happens is that your baseline level of dopamine drops. Dopamine doesn't act alone. Dopamine has close cousins or friends in the nervous system. And I'll just name off a few of those close cousins and friends. Epinephrine, also called adrenaline, is the main chemical driver of energy. We can't do anything at all, unless we have some level of epinephrine in our brain and body. So it should come as no surprise that dopamine and epinephrine, aka adrenaline, hang out together. In fact, epinephrine and adrenaline are actually manufactured from dopamine. What dopamine does is dopamine really colors the subjective experience of an activity to make it more pleasurable, to make it something that you want more of. Epinephrine is more about energy. If your dopamine is too low, you will not feel motivated. If your dopamine is really high, you will feel motivated. And if your dopamine is somewhere in the middle, how you feel depends on whether or not you had higher dopamine a few minutes ago or lower dopamine. This is important. Your experience of life and your level of motivation and drive depends on how much dopamine you have relative to your recent experience. There will be other factors too, but the level of dopamine is the primary determinant of how motivated we are, how excited we are, how outward facing we are, and how willing we are to lean into life and pursue things.
You make a mistake on Twitter or even something that isn't a mistake, and you can pay what feels to be a pretty high price. Right. Now, whether it is a high price or not is hard to tell because Twitter is so weirdly fictional. It's so hard to get a grasp on exactly what's going on.
Well, it's also your comprehension of what is your emotional reaction to people that you don't know being mean to you. Like this is what is that price?
Well,
and some people want to dismiss that as being just nothing. It's not that big a deal, but it is a big deal. It causes people to commit suicide. I mean, it has absolutely. Bullying online has caused many people to commit suicide.
Well, the thing is, the weird thing about that online communication is that, like, I find that I tend to react to a negative Twitter comment as if it's someone sitting across from me talking to me that I know. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not. And I don't even know if the person is real because the accounts are often anonymous. You're very sensitive to criticism, right? Because it's rare and because you might be wrong, especially if there's a lot of people criticizing you, because you kind of have to be psychopathic in order just to brush that off. It's like, well, 100 people think I'm wrong. There's nothing to that. It's like, well, if it's 100 people out of 100 million, but you can't tell on Twitter, right. Then it's irrelevant. But if it's a mob of 100 people that show up outside your house, which is quite kind of what Twitter feels like, then you think, well, God, I must have done something wrong because otherwise, why would all these people be here?
Right.
And I think that's why so many people are driven to apologize, when they do something on Twitter or do something and then the Twitter mobs go after them, they think, oh God, I must have done something wrong. I should do some soul searching. And so some of that's not even fear. It's more like, it's in a sense, it's a morality that's misplaced. I mean, I've almost completely stopped reading Twitter comments in the last month. And I'm definitely better for it.
Yeah, it makes you way happier, right?
Oh yeah, it's too much. It's too much.
Crazy.
It's too crazy.
Well,
yeah.
what is your number up to now? The number of followers?
About 1 million on Twitter.
Yeah, that's when it's about time to get out of Dodge.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I'm still following people and reading what people are posting, but no, the comments, I'm just
Not worth it.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
And I think it does have something to do with the technology itself. Like I do believe that small limit facilitates angry, impulsive responding.
The good thing about Twitter is it makes you boil down what you're trying to say to a very succinct thing. Although I do enjoy when someone has a good Twitter thread.
Mhm.
Like there was a really good Twitter thread. What was that gentleman's name? Respectable Lawyer? Respectable Law. He wrote a long history of the Sentinelese people that's that uncontacted tribe in the Indian Sea, where they this gentleman went there to try to convert them to Christianity, and he shot them full of arrows. Yeah, and he wrote this long history of these people and what they've had to endure with being, a few people going to them and doing some awful things and diseases and stuff like that. So I enjoy when someone will do that, like these long, like every now and then someone will use it in a novel way. I really like that.
We don't exactly know what motivates people to respond on Twitter, and it might be that the fundamental motivation for a Twitter response is anger.
Yeah.
Rather than the desire to share something, because we don't know anything about how these new communication techniques function psychologically.
Right.
Like maybe Twitter is skewed 90% towards people who are impulsively angry at that moment. It could easily be. We don't know. Like, if you're driving in your car and someone cuts you off, you curse, or at least I do. And it's often a situational issue rather than a personality flaw on the part of the other driver, even though it's easy to assume that. But you respond impulsively. I mean, God only knows how much of our social media networks are set up to differentially reward impulsive behavior. And it's also not that easy to hold people accountable in some sense. And maybe there's some utility to that, but with anonymous accounts and all of that, the anonymity is also problematic because it certainly enables people to allow their worst to manifest themselves.
It gives you the opportunity to explore controversial ideas without blowback.
True.
If it's used correctly.
Well, that's it. I think that's true. I think there's some utility. I mean, I don't think that it should be forbidden. Well, like most things, it has its advantages and its disadvantages.
Yeah, like most things. It's not entirely negative to be anonymous.
Hey, so I figured something out that I thought I'd tell you about. The negative comments that are part of social media seem to be just as potent as negative comments in real life, but the positive comments don't seem to be as positive as the positive comments in real life. Yes. And they don't seem as real. And I guess that's partly because we're wired, to be more sensitive to threat and to negative emotion because we can be hurt.
Well, it's also healthy too to not stroke your ego too much.
The technological pressure that's being put on the mainstream media is driving extreme political views as a means of gathering the attention of a shrinking market share.
That's a very interesting take on it, and I wonder how detrimental that is to us as a whole, because we are constantly dealing with this clickbait nonsense headline, and everything is a dispute, everything's a war.
Yeah. Well, it's nerve-wracking.
Yes.
I mean, I noticed this years ago because I really stopped watching the news 25 years ago, although I've been heavily involved in it the last 2 years. 24-hour news cycle, and it's produced by everyone, whether they're informed or not, and it's really high emotion, and I think that is making things look a lot worse to us than they actually are.
I think it's also similar to what we were talking about earlier when it comes to reading comments on Instagram or Twitter. I just think there's just an amount of data that's incomprehensible. I don't think you can handle it. I don't think you can navigate it. You can't navigate that many relationships. I mean, the reason why we have this Dunbar's number in our head. If you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of people, in your case, 1 million followers that are constantly interacting with you, it's going to fucking drive you mad.
Yeah. Well, you don't even know what to do with it. Because I don't even know what my ethical obligation is to my Twitter followers, because there's 1 million people following
you. Can't
so
react to all of them.
No, definitely. Well, certainly I know one limitation, which is that having it drive me insane is probably not a good outcome for anyone.
Also overwhelming is just the sheer amount of information that's available constantly about everything. There's 1 million stories every day about every single thing that's going on in your life.
Well, everywhere on the whole planet. Yeah.
And how are you supposed to navigate that? How are you supposed to get through life and concentrate on things that are truly meaningful for you in the present moment without being completely detached
Yeah.
from the outside world.
Yeah,
It's
well,
this balance
yeah.
that people try to find that is so elusive.
Yeah.
It's so hard to figure out how much to watch.
Yeah.
How much of this political process do I pay attention to?
Yeah, well, that's the big technological challenge.
Yes.
You know, I mean, we thought when I was a kid, we thought, oh my God, you know, kids are sitting in front of the television 4 hours a night. It's like, well, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, right.
You know,
now it's
now-
all day
no
long. with
kidding.
their phone. We have a rule at our house: you can't use a phone. Like once you get inside the house, there's no phone. So
Yeah.
their friends come over the house, they want to like constantly be on their phone, and we say like you can't do that. Like,
Yeah.
and they look at you like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, this is my life.
Yeah, yeah.
My life is my phone. They
Yeah.
want to make Twitter posts and Instagram, and they want to do Facebook, and
Yeah.
they want to Snapchat with each other with bunny ears on, and
Yeah.
these kids are just doing this
Yeah.
all day long.
Well, and they are mastering the technology. That's the
Yes.
other thing. It's not surprising that they're trying
Right.
to adapt to it. But
but it's happening at a really early age.
Yeah.
Because if you're giving your kid a phone, you're not putting any parental filters on it. You're allowing that kid to have full access to Google and the World Wide
No,
Web, and they're just gonna.
if you give your kid a phone and you don't think they'll know how to use the phone better than you within a year, you're a fool.
It's true.
You know, they're gonna have that thing figured out in ways that you haven't even imagined. So
Yeah. No.
yeah,
it's-
you're not controlling it. That's
No.
for sure.
It's it is a very extraordinarily unprecedented time to sort of navigate this world.
Well, Facebook says it is pausing the development of its Instagram Kids program, which was being designed for children under the age of 13. The kids version of the app would be ad-free and allow parents to monitor their child's activity. Developers say that they want more time to discuss the concerns of parents, experts, lawmakers, and regulators before launching the new version. According to the Wall Street Journal, internal research at companies like Facebook found the negative effects of social media are felt more among young people, specifically teenage girls. And many girls say that they know apps like Instagram are making them feel bad about themselves. They can't stop using them. A recent article in The Atlantic takes a look at how the inability to stay logged off of social media can best be compared to alcohol addiction. The author of that piece is Derek Thompson, and he joins us now to discuss this. Derek, very fascinating piece. I recall a few years ago, a study, I think out of Korea, found that when a country experienced widespread penetration, is the way they use it, penetration of smartphones, they saw a spike in depression and suicide amongst young people. And it specifically had to do with their access to social media and their kind of immediate, quick access to social media in the palm of their hand. So this is why I found Facebook's statement really kind of, I don't know, I mean, for lack of a better word, a little comical, because they said that they still believe that building Instagram Kids is the right thing to do, which I couldn't quite understand why they used that phrase. You know, your take on Instagram Kids and whether or not it would be the right thing to move forward with.
Look, it's not just a study in South Korea, and it's not just the internal research at Facebook, and it's not just a study that's been done at Stanford and Harvard. We now have lots and lots of research that suggests at least two things. Number one, we see rising rates of anxiety among young people in the US and around the world. And number two, that increase seems extremely correlated, not just with phone use, but with social media use. So I think we should really begin to think about and build a vocabulary around talking about the ways that Instagram and Facebook and other social media apps that may very well raise anxiety rates and create a compulsion, especially among young people who are extremely sensitive to that which is sometimes called negative social comparison. That is going online or just being with your friends and then seeing that someone has something that you don't and starting to feel really bad about that. Teens seem very, very sensitive to that psychological malady. So I think that, you know, Facebook has, they came out with this research, it was leaked into the Wall Street Journal, and now Facebook says they might pull back in their efforts to expand social media, or expand Instagram to tweens. I think that is the right decision, and it's the right decision if you look at this under the framework of social media as attention alcohol. Now, I love whiskey. I love wine. I really like beer. But I also understand, as just about every American understands, that this is a chemical that is extremely associated with dependency. And so we have a social vocabulary around dealing with that. We have designated drivers, and we tell people, okay, you should maybe not drink anymore tonight, and maybe you should take a break for this week. We talk about alcohol as something that can be compulsive and even addictive. We don't yet, I think, have the same social vocabulary around social media, and we need to build that if we're going to help vulnerable people, especially teens, especially teen girls, away from the more negative aspects of social media and potentially benefit from some of the things that can do really, really well.
Derek, look, no one's on Instagram more than me, much to the chagrin of my loved ones. But whenever a company targets children, and whenever they go after children to try and encourage children to use something, I'm naturally suspicious. And Anne-Marie and I were talking about this yesterday. You likened it to alcohol, but I also think about it in terms of we were talking yesterday, and I said it reminds me of cereal companies when we were kids, and probably still today, that put out these these cereals that were really not good for us. They were mostly made of sugar, which we know can have addictive qualities for people. You get hooked on sugar when you're a kid, and you're hooked on it for the rest of your life. And these commercials would come on TV, and we would badger my mom to get me, Fruit Loops and Fruity Pebbles and Count Chocula. I mean, I can list the names of cereals that were, not really healthy and nutritious for me. And the companies that were selling them, or at least advertising them to young children to get their parents to spend some money to buy them. That's what I sort of feel is going on here. I mean, why even create an Instagram for kids when, for all intents and purposes, kids are already on Instagram?
So I totally understand that metaphor, and it's a very, very common metaphor to use to say that social media is a little bit like extremely sugary cereals. I want to push back against it, and I'm interested if you buy my case.
Okay.
Sugary cereals aren't really good for anything, number one. And number two, we let kids eat them all the time. In fact, they're disproportionately consumed by kids. There are not a lot of 55-year-old executives that are chowing down on corn pops and Cocoa Puffs every morning and for lunch. So in that case, it's really not akin to social media, which is something that Instagram is not building for kids, but does develop compulsions among teens and older adults. That seems much more to me like alcohol, where there's literally a line that we draw in age distribution. We say people below this age cannot consume this thing in public, and people above this age can consume this thing, right? That's essentially what they're doing with Instagram. The other thing about alcohol that I think is really important is that, different from something like a sugary cereal, which really is just a delicious thing that's rotting your teeth, there's a lot of studies that suggest that a little bit of alcohol can be good for you. That just a little bit of wine on Tuesdays and Wednesdays can be really, really good for your heart. That research is evolving, but I see that as very akin to the fact that, small companies give Facebook $130 billion a year. They're not doing that because of a total illusion. They're doing that because they see a benefit. Social media can connect people and companies in ways that were totally unprecedented. And I don't want to suggest that just because this is a technology that can be compulsive and make people feel terrible about themselves, it might do that thing, but it also is doing a lot of other things. It's connecting the world in ways that's never been connected. And there are a lot of benefits and a lot of drawbacks. We're trying to tease that apart. That sounds to me a lot like alcohol. We know why alcohol is good for, cardiovascularly. We know how it's a social lubricant. We know that people just really enjoy sometimes going to the bar, but we also recognize that it has this entirely separate dark side of compulsion and addiction and liver disease. And seeing the good and the bad, the light and the dark side by side, which we have done with alcohol, something that humans have consumed for thousands of years at this point, is something we have to see more clearly with social media. It's not just sugar. It's not just rotting out your teeth. It's doing something a little bit more complicated. And I want us to sort of develop an analogical framework for seeing the good and bad.
And, and I think sort of to continue with that comparison, the other thing is, at least from a parent's point of view, there is a barrier between the sugary meal and my child. It's me, right? Like my kid needs me to get up and go to the store and buy it and bring it back. So I can just say no matter how much she bugs me. As a parent, I know it's much more challenging to keep track of what she does online. And yes, there is an age limit for, Facebook and Instagram to actually join it, but you can get on Instagram. I mean, you can scroll through the pictures if you want to without actually, being there. And so, which brings me to my other question about how do we tackle this, right? There are, like, as you point out, there are age limits for alcohol. There are age limits for tobacco. There are warnings placed on tobacco products. If you go to a liquor store, you're probably going to see somewhere, it may not be prominent, but some sort of poster about, if you need help with your addiction, here's a number to call. But how do we approach social media? I mean, should we be seeing these sort of warnings as well before you can click through to the next picture?
Yeah, I mean, not to hammer home the metaphor over and over, but this is again why I think it's really important to see social media as attention alcohol rather than some other food metaphor, right? Fruit Loops are a product for children that parents have the ability to filter, right? You may have Fruit Loops today, you may not have it. You may have it this week, you may not have it. Alcohol is totally different. Alcohol is a product for adults that we say children should not have access to. And that is, I think, exactly the determination that Instagram is starting to make with kids, or at least it is the policy that Instagram just announced, which I hope they follow through in the next few years. Lots of people love Instagram and do not have a problematic relationship with it at all. They follow their influencers, they follow their friends, they like some posts, they heart some posts, they go on with their life, right? It is just like watching television. It's not that bad for them. But there's a separate group of people, especially teenagers, that are extremely sensitive to compulsive behavior and negative social comparison. And Instagram should be doing much more about finding ways to warn them, keep them from overusing it, but also give parents the ability to monitor tween use, right? Monitor the use of children or kids or tweens who shouldn't necessarily be on it in the first place. So those are the sort of tools that I think Instagram should begin to build into its product. Sure, allow 35-year-olds, 45-year-olds, 55, et cetera, to use it as they're essentially using it. I think that's probably okay. But for teenagers, I think we need much more controls, and we probably need to find stronger ways to keep people, say, under 13 and 14 off the app entirely.
All right, Derek, you sold me on your hypothesis. Social media as similarly as alcohol. But let me throw another one at you and see what your take is on this. Going back again to my childhood, which all of my agita stems from in life. I also then wonder, so what does Instagram exist to do? Is it there so that we can share pictures of our lives, or ultimately is it about selling us something, whatever it is that advertisers are interested in getting us to sort of buy? Or, I mean, I don't know how many times I look on Instagram and stuff comes up that I have no idea like why the algorithm would choose me for this specific item, but it's there in my feed, right? I wonder then, is it similar to the cartoons that we watched as children and Saturday morning cartoons, which were, people forget that these cartoons were produced, yes, because they wanted some wholesome entertainment for kids, but what was around those cartoons? The advertisement around those cartoons were basically things that we then bugged our parents to buy. And that's why they figured, we can produce a cheap cartoon so that kids will go out and buy that $6 million man action figure with the power grip. And we're going to sell a lot of those if we produce a 15-minute or 20-minute cartoon on Batman. Is there a similar analogy there?
Absolutely. What you named are two examples of advertising-supported media, right? Cartoons for kids or advertising-supported media. The kids watch the cartoons, and then an ad for whatever, Pampers or some Hasbro toy comes up. Television news is advertising-supported media. People talk, they talk about issues, they talk about Biden, they talk about Instagram, and then what comes after that? Some ads. Newspapers are advertising-supported media. Linear television, traditional TV with the cable bundle, not Netflix and HBO, but traditional television is advertising-supported media. You have an audience that is engaged by the content, and then aggregators are sold, advertisers are sold an aggregate of that audience in order to sell them things. So, the existence of advertising-supported media is something like 170, 180 years old, and Instagram is just an extremely successful version of it, not only because it's so compelling to people, but also because Facebook and Instagram know so much about our behavior that they can build a sort of psychosocial demographic to fit into, and then sell us something that we really, really want. Someone really, really loves wine, or they really, really need some new bedding. Well, they're sold, a wine club membership or some beautiful new bedding. Instagram is much better at that than, say, an old-fashioned newspaper or traditional television. But I think what you said is exactly right, that yes, the behavioral aspects of social media, the behavioral aspects might be comparable to something like attention alcohol, but the economics of social media is a different metaphor altogether. That is advertising-supported media. It is like a supercharged steroidal version of television, newspapers, everything, radio, everything that has been advertising supported in the media ecosystem for hundreds of years.
So fascinating. So Anne-Marie, real quick then, is there another discussion? So if you were to say to your daughter, you can't be on social media at all, does that, especially as they get a little older, as they get into junior high school and in high school, is that another sort of stress for a young person that all of their friends are on social media and they're the one kid who doesn't have a smartphone, or they're the one kid who doesn't have an Instagram account? Does that lead to some of the, in other words, are you stuck between a rock and a hard place as a parent?
Yeah, I'm not there yet because my kid's kind of young, but certainly other parents have said that that's their dilemma, and other parents have asked me, does your daughter have a smartphone yet? Because their kids are asking about getting smartphones. So yeah, I definitely, think that it is. And I mean, you can put sort of all the barriers you want, kind of software barriers or whatever you want to do to have a kid-friendly environment. But content creators figure out ways around that. YouTube has a lot of stuff in place, but I can guarantee, like, once every couple of weeks, my kid will be watching a video and I'll hear a word that she knows she's not supposed to hear or say, and she knows because she very quickly changes the video, and it's gotten through whatever barriers. Like, it's really an impossible task for a parent to keep track of everything that your kid consumes online. So you either take it away from them, and to the point that you were making, there's value in what's online, so you don't want to take it away from them completely. My daughter's conversations have surpassed what I was talking about when I was 10 years old. And part of it is because she's consuming, all these different videos. And sometimes they're talking about news, sometimes they're talking about science, stuff that I never had access to, that she has access to now. But as a parent, I would prefer fewer options when it comes to the sort of stuff she's drawn to, because there's no way that I can keep track now of a kiddie version of Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and whatever else they're sort of dreaming up. I just couldn't.
Yeah. Encyclopedia Britannica, and get off my lawn. That's what I say. Derek, this is such a fascinating discussion. It really, really is. And I encourage everyone who's watching this to check out your piece in The Atlantic, because, clearly we've been hitting you with all sorts of questions because it is such a fascinating subject. And it's one that parents are going to be wrestling with more and more. And I don't think that this is probably going to go away. They've perhaps held back on it now as they address some of the concerns that people have, but my guess is that it'll come roaring back very soon. So Derek Thompson, thank you very, very much for an illuminating discussion. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So as online content increases in popularity, so does the number of people trying to make money off of it. That's what we were just talking about. And you might be surprised how young some of them are. So be sure to check out the CBSN Originals, Kid Influencers, Few Rules, Big Money, streaming now at cbsnews.com/influencers.
I'm Jeff Bezos.
What is your claim to fame?
I'm the founder of Amazon.com.
From the award-winning producers of The Facebook Dilemma,
Richest guy in the world.
Frontline investigates Amazon.
Amazon taking over the world a good thing?
questioning those who run the company,
What would you say to someone who feels as though humans are increasingly being treated like robots?
That's not the experience that I had in setting it up.
and those no longer there.
Most people would assume there is a pretty high safety standard on Amazon.
And that assumption would be incorrect.
The tools are not all battle tested.
Asking if Amazon is a monopoly.
The question for the democracy is, are we okay with one company essentially winning capitalism?
How did you and Jeff think about the call to break you guys up?
Simply because the company's been successful doesn't mean it's somehow too big.
Now on Frontline,
Domination was very much the idea.
Amazon Empire.
Jeff Bezos has already conquered the retail frontier. Now he's got a plan to colonize the planet.
Bezos is laying out his plans for colonizing
Bezos
space.
is known for going big, and now he's literally shooting for the moon.
In May of 2019, Jeff Bezos, the richest person on the planet, unveiled his latest invention.
This is Blue Moon. It's time to go back to the moon, this time to stay.
Jeff has said over and over again that the most important work he's doing is work in space. What he's built with Amazon is really important and really interesting, and it's revolutionized commerce. But it's only revolutionized commerce.
Bezos' plan is to chart a new course for the future of humanity.
Manufactured worlds, rotated to create artificial gravity with centrifugal force. These are very large structures, miles on end, and they hold 1 million people or more each.
It's an idea he's had since he was a teenager.
This is me at high school, and I want to highlight this quote: "The Earth is finite. If the world economy and population is to keep expanding, space is the only way to go." I still believe that.
The way Jeff Bezos sees it is that consumerism is an example of how today's society lives better than our parents did and our grandparents. And he wants, future generations to continue to have an increasingly better lifestyle.
These are beautiful. People are going to want to live here.
Bezos unveiled his extraterrestrial plans at a time of growing concern about the empire he's built here on Earth.
Amazon is the great disruptor, from books to retail to grocery stores.
For more than 25 years, Jeff Bezos has been disrupting and transforming almost every aspect of our modern lives.
Once you start connecting the dots, you see that Amazon is building all of the invisible infrastructure for our futures.
Amazon announced a healthcare partnership.
Amazon is helping the CIA build a secure cloud.
How much of the internet do you run?
It's a good question. It's a lot, though.
But in recent years, Amazon and Bezos have come under scrutiny for their aggressive tactics and expanding power.
Everything that is admirable about Amazon is also something that we should fear about it.
For the past year, we've been investigating how Jeff Bezos built his empire and at what cost.
And so think about this. Big things start small.
Jeff Bezos' empire has its roots not in Silicon Valley, but on Wall Street. That's where the young Princeton graduate went to work in the early 1990s at a secretive hedge fund called D.E. Shaw.
David Shaw was the one who revolutionized Wall Street by introducing data. And I think Jeff really embraced that idea that, hey, if you have data, ultimately you win.
One of the things that David Shaw asked Jeff Bezos to do was to go and investigate new businesses, and in particular, this new thing in the early 90s called the World Wide Web.
We all know that a communications revolution is underway in this country.
What is the internet?
It's sort of the mother of all networks.
It's information highways.
It's kind of like your remote control to the world.
Bezos was quick to see the untapped potential of the new digital landscape and was determined to get in on it.
I came across the startling statistic that web usage was growing at 2,300% a year. So I decided I would try and find a business plan that made sense in the context of that growth. And
and I picked books as the first best product to sell online. Because books are incredibly unusual in one respect, and that is that there are more items in the book category than there are items in any other category by far. So when you have that many items, you can literally build a store online that couldn't exist any other way.
The store he was imagining didn't exist, so he decided to build it himself.
The reaction to Jeff's idea to start selling books on the internet was pretty incredulous, from a lot of the people close to him. His mom tried to convince him to just do it at night or over the weekends. She didn't want to see him give up his job.
Jeff called and he told me that he and Mackenzie were quitting their jobs and they were moving to Seattle and starting a company. I said, great, well, what are you gonna do? He said, we're gonna sell books. I said, nice. He said, on the internet. I said, oh. Jeff, why will anybody buy anything from you? And he said, well, we're gonna have more books than anybody else.
One of the first names Bezos considered for his new website was Relentless.com.
Why relentless?
Relentless meant we move on no matter what. He ultimately obviously decided that Relentless wasn't quite the right fit. Amazon, Earth's largest river, was. Amazon means gigantic.
In terms of relentlessness, so stopping at nothing, is that an apt description of Jeff?
No. It's not that Jeff stops at nothing. It's that when Jeff sets his mind on a goal that he thinks he can achieve, he won't stop until he's proven wrong or until he achieves it.
Jeff and Mackenzie had rented a house in Bellevue, and then we moved to a small second-floor office in the south part of Seattle.
Shel Kappan was Amazon employee number one of 9 former Amazon insiders who agreed to talk on camera.
What the company is now was nowhere in my wildest imagination. Nowhere. So the fact that it could have the kind of position in the world that it has now, I had no clue.
In July 1995, Amazon.com went live.
It was an incredible novelty. It was tiny and obscure. And it's very hard to imagine, but the entire universe that Amazon now dominates did not exist.
Amazon.com. This virtual shop claims to be the world's largest bookstore.
It didn't take long for Bezos' vision to prove prescient.
What makes us different is vast selection, convenience. We deliver right to the desktop. If our catalog were printed on paper, it would be the size of 7 New York City phone books.
The company quickly outgrew the garage and soon had more than 50 employees. In 1996, James Marcus applied to be number 55.
There was a very palpable excitement in the air at this place. And of course, at this point, Jeff Bezos was the first person to interview every prospective employee. So I was ushered into his office. He wanted to see how fast you were on your feet. He also always wanted to know your SAT scores.
You want to know your SAT scores?
Every time, yes.
How old were you at the time?
I was 30 or 37.
This is the original sign that I made for Amazon.com. Blue spray paint on white poster board.
Jeff wasn't a figure out of folklore at that point. He was not the wealthiest man in the world.
Here's my computer, Amazon.com, up on the screen. Hello, Jeff Bezos.
He was a small, nondescript, sandy-haired man sitting at a desk with quite a large and eruptive laugh. But he wasn't threatening. He was a normal guy to a sort of amazing extent.
HAL 9000 hat is very important. Hal and I share a birthday. We're both born on January 12th.
It belied, an enormous Napoleonic ambition.
One of the people I really like, Thomas Edison, here's a model of his original light bulb. He's famous for saying 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. It turns out ideas are the easy part. Execution is everything.
Domination was on Jeff's mind from the beginning. One of his sort of second in command people said to me, you have to understand that Jeff wants to sell many more things than books. And Jeff's idea is that in the near distant future, you could buy a kayak from Amazon. And after you bought the kayak, you could figure out good places to kayak and buy travel services from Amazon. So those ambitions were very clear. And this was very early on. But he was clearly thinking in those terms from the get-go.
How did that ring to you at the time?
A little bit exciting and a little bit nutty.
Amazon.com. Very good website. You should really try it.
If you signed on to work at a kind of futuristic bookstore, and the guy who owned it was suddenly talking about selling, you know, every object in the universe, you just weren't sure how seriously to take it.
Though his public image was often unserious,
That was awesome!
inside the company, Bezos was a hard-charging manager relentlessly focused on the principle that would make Amazon one of the most trusted brands in the world. The customer always comes first.
This culture of customer obsession, obsessive focus on customer, obsesses over our customers, totally obsessing over the customer experience.
We used to call it customer ecstasy. It means building, delivering, focusing on your customer. And we did it, you know, in the very, very early days at every stage.
Jennifer Cast was there in the early days and is one of 6 top Amazon executives the company put forward to speak to us.
Customer obsession was our North Star. And so, you know, it was a place where we knew we were a part of something that was new, the internet. There was an excitement that we were doing something that hadn't been done before. It was exhilarating. We were all aligned around building for customers.
Hey, you guys.
I've heard there was an empty chair that would often be put at meetings.
Yeah.
Who was in the empty chair?
Yeah, so that empty chair was there to remind us all to understand the customer, have empathy for the customer, understand the details of the customer experience. The customer isn't there. We have to bring forward the voice of the customer.
Thank you for calling Amazon.com.
And Bezos quickly learned that in this new online world, he could understand exactly how customers were behaving.
All orders do need to be placed online, but I'd be happy.
It was made clear from the beginning that data collection was also one of Amazon's businesses. All customer behavior that flowed through the site was recorded and tracked. And that itself was a valuable commodity.
Okay, have you visited our website?
We could track how a customer navigated through the site. So we could see what you looked at. We could also see what you paused at. We could see what you put in your basket but didn't order. We could see what you put in your basket and did order. So that's when we started realizing, man, this is rich. This is rich, rich, rich. And so we've used it for everything.
What do you do with that information? That's the data that allows us to predict or try to predict what books that you would like that you haven't discovered yet.
Bezos treated the site as a laboratory where he studied customer behavior along with his chief scientist, Andreas Wagen.
I was shocked to see how predictable people are. If you take the time of the day into account, if you take maybe when they were last on the site, how long they were on the site last time, how long they're on the site today, you know what they're falling for.
Whoever owns, collects the data, if you have access to it and rights to data, then you are king. It's all about the data. Everything.
One of the most fascinating kind of tools we have at our disposal is the ability to do active experiments. It's kind of this huge laboratory.
We did not think about it as exploiting. We thought about helping people make better decisions.
I was starting to feel that that was less respectful toward the consumer, who was, after all, supposed to be our God, the person whose ecstasy was our very reason for being. And it was closer to getting a cow into a milking stall and extracting as many panels as possible during each visit. And that felt a little more unsavory. But that was the business of Amazon.
Amazon has added 880,000 new customers.
While Bezos was using these insights to bring more and more customers into Amazon,
The number of customers who use the website has increased fourfold.
there was one thing he hadn't done yet.
The company's never made a profit.
That's right.
Now, why? How does it? Why? How does that? Why?
Seems like a new math, doesn't it? Yeah.
Bezos would spend years losing money trying to beat his competition. And he convinced investors to go along with it.
One of Jeff Bezos's greatest accomplishments has been his ability to get Wall Street to accept the fact that for 20 some years, Amazon wasn't going to be very profitable. And that's okay because they're building infrastructure that will create huge opportunities for them to gain scale and gain customers and gain business.
He spelled it out in a letter to shareholders after the company first went public. It's all about the long term, he wrote, rather than short-term profits or Wall Street reactions.
And he essentially says, we are going to forego profits in order to take market share. That our strategy is to lose money, which enables us then to put other companies out of business who can't afford to lose money.
That strategy wouldn't sit well with critics like Stacy Mitchell, who advocates for small businesses.
In essence, at the very beginning, he's signaling to shareholders, I have a strategy to monopolize the market, and that's going to reward you, but it's going to be far down the road. And will you come along with me? And they said yes.
Investors also recognized Bezos's essential advantage over physical stores, which had to charge their customers sales tax, unlike online businesses.
So not collecting sales tax gave Amazon a big leg up over bricks and mortar retailers. And that was central to their early strategy of gaining market share as quickly as they can.
What booksellers were saying to me is that this is driving my customers to Amazon. They'll come into the store, they'll browse, they find what they want, but then they'll go buy it on Amazon because they can save that sales tax.
So it was a very irksome early big issue for the book vendors. First of all, they were kind of the canaries in the mine, so to speak, and then lots of other retailers.
Amazon has added thousands of warehouse workers and 3 million square feet of space.
Amazon's sales tax advantage would be central to its success as it expanded beyond books into other products.
We have a fantastic selection of things you can look at. Electronics, and then of course toys. Yeah, thank you. Here is we've got the friendly Pokemon. This is more than 10 times the selection that you will find in a typical physical world software store.
But Bezos was still a long way from his goal of Amazon being the place where you could buy everything online. And he saw a way to achieve it.
Amazon could soon become the Walmart of the internet.
There were thousands of businesses eager to sell online. Bezos offered them a way to do it.
Amazon is transforming itself from an online bookstore to an online mall.
He transformed Amazon into a retail platform where anyone could sell their goods to his customers, and invited thousands of other businesses to be a part of it.
It's the easiest place for anybody, small or large, who wants to set up shop online, to sell online, because they can access our 12 million plus customers. Anybody, all comers.
We're talking about hundreds of thousands of companies with literally tens of millions of products.
Name brand stores started selling on Bezos' platform, and so did tens of thousands of small entrepreneurs.
Everyone knew Amazon.com. The only people that knew SuperDuperHoops.com were the ones that were searching to buy a basketball hoop and saw our name on an advertisement. To us, it was really a no-brainer. We knew that we would, increase our sales. First year, we did 100,000. Next year, we did 1 million. We did 2 million, 4 million. We were doubling every year in the early days.
It was great for the companies, and even greater for Jeff Bezos.
Amazon has become the most recognizable name in e-commerce.
Not only would he take a cut of everything other businesses sold, he'd also keep his own store on the platform, competing against everyone else in the marketplace he owned and controlled.
He owns the main street. He has the main street real estate. Not just one building on the corner, the entire main street.
How Amazon would wield its power over the online marketplace would eventually become a question for government regulators. But early on, there were indications. The first to see them were book publishers.
Amazon took over a large market share of the publishing industry very, very fast. They were very quickly in a position to demand concessions. You know, I think that was a moment where publishers started to realize, oh, wait a minute, like they're our partner, but they now have the beginnings of a boot on our windpipe.
Inside the company, they had launched a strategy that some called the Gazelle Project, because they'd heard Bezos wanted them to pursue publishers the way a cheetah pursues a sickly gazelle.
Well, you don't go after the strongest. It's like the cheetah. The cheetah looks for the weak, looks for the sick, looks for the small. That's what you go for. So don't start with, you know, number 1 publisher. Start with number 7 publisher, and then number 6 publisher. And by the time you get to number 3, 2, and 1, the noise has going to gotten back to them. They're going to know this is coming, and chances are you may be able to settle that without a full-on war.
We were just this little mom and pop publishing company, publishing poetry books and translated fiction.
In the early 2000s, the number of books Dennis Johnson was selling on Amazon had been rising steadily. Then one day, he got a phone call.
Our distributor called us up to talk about our Amazon contract. And he said, I went out to dinner last night with Amazon. It was like going out to dinner with the Godfather. They want a kickback. That's the word he used, kickback. And he said they wanted 4% more of our sales.
Was that unusual?
It was, in our experience, it was totally unprecedented. Yes.
Randy Miller ran the European book team and says he saw nothing wrong with Amazon's tough tactics to challenge publishers on prices and profit margins.
In order to bring them into line, we would actually take them out of automated merchandising, take their prices up to list price. We would put references on the product page, their product page, saying, you want this book for on this topic for a way cheaper price? Click here. And we'd send them to whoever we thought their worst competitor was. That was how Amazon forced their vendors to comply. But that's an old Walmart trick. I mean, it wasn't like Amazon created that, and it made a difference. And Jeff kind of got excited about it.
When Dennis Johnson still refused to give in to Amazon's terms, he says the buy button on all Melville House books suddenly disappeared, making it impossible for customers to purchase them on Amazon.
I mean, this is the company that referred to little publishers like me as wounded gazelles, I believe. That's how they think. That's how he thought from the beginning. And we eventually had to pay what at the time I called a bribe. And our attitude toward Amazon was, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and carry on as best you can.
Jeff Bezos may say that Amazon comes along and has given publishers like yourself access to a huge distribution channel for your books. Has Amazon been good for your business?
Well, absolutely they have. Any bookseller that sells our books is good for our business. So I'm not complaining that Amazon is selling our books. I'm just complaining of the way that their tactics are hurting the industry I love.
In addition to granting interviews, Amazon responded to written questions. Regarding Dennis Johnson's characterizations, it told us, Amazon disagrees with this account.
Were you uncomfortable with that sort of ruthlessness ever?
Well, no, because I was in retail. I mean, people think that's ruthless. I looked at some people at Amazon, wow, that's kind of mean. And I'm like, oh, a retailer and a supplier having a disagreement? Stop the presses. It happens all the time. I mean, like you've got finite margin and somebody's going to have to give. And a lot of times Amazon wasn't the one to give.
Kindle is a purpose-built reading device.
The tension between Amazon and book publishers would ramp up even further with the unveiling of the Kindle, which helped the industry transition to the digital age, but gave Amazon more power to set prices lower.
And new releases are only $9.99.
Around that time, Barry Lynn, an advocate for broad antitrust enforcement, was growing increasingly concerned by what he was hearing from publishers.
If the door was open, the publisher would say, hey, you know, Amazon, they're just a terrific customer. They're our biggest customer. They buy the most books. They sell the most books. We love them. And you close the door and they say, Amazon is destroying our business model. They're destroying our business. They have way too much power. We must do something about that.
Lynn wanted publishers to speak up publicly and thought federal antitrust regulators might investigate whether Amazon was a monopoly, illegally abusing its market dominance in anti-competitive ways.
And they'd say, no way, I'm not going to talk about Amazon in public. I'm not talking about them on Capitol Hill. They will take retribution against me.
To which you responded,
well, that's why we have to do something about it.
Jennifer Cast ran Amazon's books division in its formative years.
We've had a difficult time in some ways getting publishers to talk to us on camera about Amazon. In part, it seems the reason is that they're afraid. How do you react to that publishers find it uncomfortable to talk about Amazon publicly?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't seen that.
Yeah.
I haven't been in your shoes. I'm sure they have. I mean, if you're saying that they don't talk negatively about us, I mean, I know they have a lot of good things to say about us. You know, I don't know why they wouldn't speak their minds. We certainly value speaking our minds.
There is this well-known anecdote about cheetahs and gazelles, this gazelle program. Do you know about that?
I don't.
We've talked to former Amazonians about it, where Jeff had said we should basically try to negotiate with book publishers and try to get better terms and treat the smaller publishers as a cheetah would go after a wounded gazelle.
I didn't hear the cheetah and gazelle example, but what we were looking for was people that were willing to move away from the old model of bricks and mortar to a new model, which was, you know, a virtual store that had many different types of opportunities to present their books to customers.
I want to talk a little bit about how we think about innovation at Amazon.com.
Amazon would begin to accumulate even more power in 2005 when Bezos quietly rolled out a revolutionary new program, Amazon Prime.
It has something called the Prime Shipping Program, where for roughly
Amazon Prime, we only launched this a week ago. You pay $79 a year and you get 2-day shipping for free.
It was a risky bet, and it paid off.
The linchpin, or the glue, if you will, and probably the seminal moment in Amazon's business history was the introduction of what has become the most successful membership program in history, and that's Prime.
Many in this audience will already be Amazon Prime members. Bless you. This is very much appreciated.
Eventually, more than 150 million people would sign up for the free shipping, a tremendous expense for Amazon. But to Bezos, it was worth it.
The Prime program at Amazon is one of the most important drivers of Amazon's growth. When you go on and you look to buy a product and it's available in 2 days, delivered to your door anywhere in the country, that Amazon Prime program becomes a mechanism that keeps bringing you back as a customer to keep buying and keep searching for new products on Amazon.
2-day delivery anywhere in the country was a big promise for a company that, at the time, had less than 10 warehouses. So Bezos went on a building spree. Across the country, Amazon warehouses began to spring up, filled with millions of products being sold on Bezos's platform. He'd call them fulfillment centers, and they'd create hundreds of thousands of jobs in places hard hit by the Great Recession.
10% of Pennsylvania residents unemployed. Job market's in complete disarray.
Like Allentown, Pennsylvania.
At that time, it was tremendous news that an employer was coming and actually opening a facility and hiring people versus, you know, gutting half the staff.
Spencer Soper was a business reporter for the Allentown Morning Call when Amazon opened in the area in 2010. He began hearing stories about working in the warehouse.
People are basically in this big sprawling warehouse that's stocked with goods in very random fashion. And they have scanners that tell them which things to get. And people are walking maybe 10, 15 miles a day. People just kind of crisscrossing this big warehouse all day long.
As workers told him about the punishing pace to meet the daily quota of packages and the intense heat, Soper and his colleagues started to investigate further.
People really felt like Amazon was playing fast and loose with their health.
Soper discovered there had been numerous complaints to authorities at the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA.
They actually had a complaint from an emergency room doctor who called their hotline one day saying, listen, you might want to check out this Amazon place. I've had like people parading through my emergency room to be treated for heat stress. There was a security guard who worked in the facility who sent a complaint to OSHA saying that he saw pregnant women suffering heat stress in the facility. And so there's just like these red flags right and left.
After an investigation, OSHA said Amazon needed to keep the temperatures in the warehouses lower. In a statement at the time, the company said it installed new industrial air conditioning and pledged that worker safety was its #1 priority.
Amazon is shrewd business people. Shrewd business people know when they have leverage. And when you're the only shop hiring people in town, you can push them a lot harder than you can when they've got alternatives.
Over the following years, Amazon would hire hundreds of thousands of workers and become one of the largest jobs creators in the country. At the fulfillment centers, Bezos experimented with new techniques and technologies to boost productivity.
Willingness to experiment is the key to being able to do new things. So we do, hundreds of experiments every day in our fulfillment centers to get a little bit better, kind of like incremental invention.
When a company called Kiva perfected a warehouse robot, Amazon bought the whole company.
Amazon has acquired Kiva Systems. They make shipping robots.
It helped transform the work environment in Amazon's warehouses.
When I first showed up at Amazon in 1999, I led our global operations team.
Jeff Wilke created the Amazon Fulfillment Center system and is one of 2 CEOs under Jeff Bezos.
As we've added 200,000 robots in that same time frame since 2012, we've added 300,000 people in our fulfillment centers. So what happens is the robots change the work. So they allow us, people don't have to walk as far, which is a complaint that we've heard in the past. They make the job safer. They make them higher quality because we present a smaller set of options to employees. And that's all good for customers, and it's good for employees too.
But at the same time, complaints have persisted.
People who've worked in warehouses for decades say this is different. This is not the same.
We're here today because we want to make sure that these workers know about their rights in the workplace, especially around heat.
Shahari Arkowski is an advocate for warehouse workers in the San Bernardino, California area, an Amazon hub with 10 fulfillment centers and over 15,000 employees.
Because of the way that Amazon operates, because of the way that they set their rates for productivity, it's a lot harder work physically, but also psychologically.
We sat down with a group in San Bernardino who'd recently worked at Amazon.
When they first got here, I thought it was exciting. Like for me, I was thinking maybe I could find a place where, I'm going to set roots of a good job, move up in place. But after being there for a while, I was like, there's no way.
It's like, okay, this is where I could probably make a career. But once you work there for a certain amount of time, it's just like, it's just not realistic how they expect you to work.
Like dozens of workers we've spoken to around the country, they say they've struggled to keep up with the rate Amazon expected them to pick and pack items.
How realistic are rates that they're giving you?
I mean,
What's realistic at all?
Not realistic?
No.
There's absolutely no way to make rate. You got to find little ways to cheat it, because once you hit rate, by the end of the week, they bump it up again, because they start saying, hey, people could hit those rates, could hit those numbers. Hey, let's push them a little harder. Every week, it seemed like it was going up.
You have security cameras right behind you at all times that are looking at you 24/7. And if you don't meet standards or their rates,
you're out the door, you're just disposable.
Every worker has a scanner at all times that basically track exactly where you're at.
And they have a little blue line at the bottom of the screen. And it has like how many seconds that you have to have it done by the time it hits 0. And it puts you into panic mode.
And pretty much you can't talk to people. You can't be in the same aisle as them. You just constantly have to sit there scanning like a robot all day long. If they catch you not scanning, you get a write-up.
And what they're doing is they're producing this massive data that they are using to be able to analyze the entire workforce.
We're not treated as human beings. We're not even treated as robots. We're treated as part of the data stream.
It's the incentive at any warehouse on any assembly line to get the most out of any worker, you know, to make rates to be as efficient as possible, to be as productive as possible. So I don't see exactly what's different about Amazon as opposed to any other warehouse.
Amazon is the cutting edge. Other warehouses are starting to adopt these technologies. Other companies are definitely interested in doing what Amazon is doing. Data collection could become basically the standard for all workers, and that you're never enough. You're never able to keep up.
Amazon told us work rates are not based on an individual employee's performance, and that the scanning devices workers use are not for tracking people, but inventory, a common practice in the warehouse industry.
We've talked to workers around the country, both current and former workers. They've described the pace of work as being really grueling. In the early thinking about rates and how far you could push human beings in terms of their productivity, what was the thinking about that?
Well, obviously, if the rates are too high, you're not going to have people showing up for work. So we have 600,000 people at the company. Most of them are in the fulfillment centers, and they come to work every day. They stay for years. These are considered great jobs in the hundreds of communities where we have fulfillment centers all over the world. And in the US, we have almost every state has an operation in it. And people come to work because these are great jobs. They're safe. We pay double the minimum wage, the national minimum wage. We have terrific benefits. The benefits for the folks that work on the floor are the same benefits that my family has access to. Our family leave is like 20 weeks. So the rates are set so that we can accomplish what we need to, which is get orders to customers in a reasonable time and in a high quality way. And that creates a workplace that people want to come back to, and they do.
Amazon wouldn't tell us how long fulfillment center workers stay on the job or how often they're injured. But workers we spoke to say the rates are higher than other warehouses, and that the company rebuffs attempts to unionize.
We do not believe unions are in the best interest of our customers, our shareholders, or most importantly, our associates.
This is a clip from a video the company says it used in the past to teach managers about employees' rights and labor laws.
The most obvious signs would include use of words associated with unions or union-led movements like living wage or steward.
Early on, Amazon took a position to basically be anti-union. Why was that decision made?
I don't think we made the decision to be anti-union. We just feel that all of the things that unions would want to get us to do, we've already done.
What about setting rate, though? Do you not see that there's a little bit more leverage in the hands of management in this scenario than there would be in a unionized environment?
I don't know. It's hard to speculate on that, but I do think that we have the obligation to set rates that are, again, going to encourage people to seek these jobs and deliver for customers, you know, what we've promised.
What would you say to someone, though, who's worked in your fulfillment centers that feels as though there's been that humans are increasingly being treated like robots? Because it's something that we've actually heard, and I don't sense it's hyperbole.
Well, that's not the experience that I had in setting it up or that I've seen. It's certainly true that these jobs are not for everybody. And there may be people that don't want to do this kind of work.
Amazon executives also stress the company has become an industry leader in training its workforce for career advancement.
We just announced a pledge recently to spend $700 million to upskill which is basically creating career opportunities for people, 100,000 of our employees. We pay 95% of tuition to go to college to get a skill that isn't about Amazon, that's about creating options for the employees. And I would expect those people to take advantage of that, work for us for a couple of years, and go do something that they would much rather do. And that's okay.
There'll be people that will hear what you all are saying and they'll say, well, you signed up for physical labor. A job is a job. There were benefits, and they're now investing at $700 million to do retraining for other types of jobs. What's the real grievance? What is there to complain about?
I actually used to think that way for a while. When I first started, whoever I heard complaints from was like, well, it was in the job description and you signed up for it. The part they don't talk about is the safety rules that you have to ignore to make rate. It's not just you go in, okay, and you do your job and that's it.
So you're in a weird bind.
It's incredibly hard to meet rate while following all the safety procedures.
A complaint that we've heard from workers in terms of the sort of automation of their work as humans. Some of them telling us that, yes, there are high safety standards in these fulfillment centers, but that in order to make rate, they're having to cheat the standard a little bit.
Well, I would say it's not okay. So from the moment that I arrived 20 years ago, I made it very clear to our operations teams that we will not compromise the safety of our employees to do anything else. So we have a culture that if we are asking people to do something that they have to do too fast to be safe, they can raise their hand and say this isn't right, and we'll fix it.
For years, Amazon has put a happy face on its business and its workforce.
Give a little bit. Give a little bit of your love.
Even in Amazon's commercials, the people are almost like shadows and silhouettes. It's all about boxes. And there's like happy boxes singing and bumbling their way to your door. Like, oh, no.
There's so much that we need.
They don't want you to even think about how they do this. They just want you to be wowed and, oh, how'd this get here?
I'll give a little bit of my love to you.
They wanted people to just think, whoa, magic.
And magic was a big part of Bezos's marketing strategy, with an emphasis on the company's miraculous level of innovation and growth.
We started Amazon Prime in 2005, but then something very extraordinary happened. This. In 2011, the slope of that graph changed a lot.
As Amazon grew, he wanted his top executives to think about the kind of company it was becoming. He wrote a memo titled Amazon.love. A copy of it was obtained by Brad Stone.
The memo is another example of Jeff being very prescient about the future. It's Jeff grappling with the idea that not all big companies are loved, that there is something that we get uncomfortable with when we talk about very big companies. Rudeness is not cool. Defeating tiny guys is not cool. Risk-taking is cool. Winning is cool. Polite is cool. Defeating bigger, unsympathetic guys is cool. Inventing is cool. Explorers are cool. Conquerors are not cool.
Some businesses, you can tell when you go in and have meetings with them, they have a conqueror mentality. And there's a big difference between being a conqueror and being an explorer. And I think in this very inventive space that we're in, it pays to explore.
But to some watching Amazon's growth, the company was falling short of that ideal and taking steps to make sure nothing got in its way. In 2013, Amazon was moving to create its own delivery system and made a key decision. Rather than hire its own drivers, it built a network of independent businesses to deliver packages.
They weren't just going to dabble here and dabble there. They were going to go and create a system that would rival FedEx or UPS.
ProPublica reporter Patricia Callahan, in conjunction with BuzzFeed, has investigated the system Amazon set up.
They figured out a way to get around regulation. The cargo vans they choose are big enough to stuff with hundreds of Amazon packages, but they're small enough that they're not regulated by the federal government.
An 84-year-old woman struck and killed by an Amazon delivery truck. A woman hit and killed in a parking lot.
ProPublica and BuzzFeed found that drivers are under intense pressure to deliver packages,
After striking him, the van maneuvered around Salinas and his dog.
and they documented more than 60 crashes, including 13 deaths since 2015.
An infant critically injured in a car crash has died.
When it came time to figure out who's responsible, Amazon would always say, it's a contractor, it's not our responsibility.
Now, you've been able to find 13 deaths, and that's over the course of several years. Is that statistically significant given all of the packages that they deliver in any day or any given year?
I don't pretend to claim that there's only 13 deaths and that I found every single one. I just found enough to show that this is happening around the country. With UPS, there's a record. There's a federal record. You can look at how many serious injury and fatal accidents they have. With Amazon, that doesn't exist. No one knows the safety records of all of Amazon's contractors.
Amazon disputed the ProPublica report. It would not release any data on crashes involving its driver network, but told us it had a better than average safety record, and that nothing is more important to them than safety.
Any accident is one accident too many. So just as we're focused on safety in the fulfillment centers and product safety, we set very high standards with all of those partners for safe performance. We have training videos for the third parties that work with us to help them understand what we expect in terms of the drive. We have mapping software that we use to help them find the right routes. Every one of our drivers is required, including the third parties, are required to have comprehensive insurance, including liability insurance, so that if there is an accident, that the person who's injured is covered.
Amazon wants to get Prime members their packages even faster.
In the last year, Amazon announced a change to the way it handles Prime deliveries. Instead of delivering packages in 2 days, they promised to do it in 1.
Free next day delivery all across the U.S.
It's impossible for me to imagine a world 20 years from now where a customer comes up to me and says, Jeff, I love Amazon. I just wish your prices were a little higher. Or, I love Amazon. I just wish you delivered a little more slowly.
At the same time the delivery network was being set up, Amazon was also rapidly expanding its product offerings, inviting more sellers onto the site, including those from China.
It basically makes it to where it's super easy for these companies who are maybe not as careful with adhering to the law, where they're able to just start a business up on Amazon, import some stuff, sell it, cause some problems, and then disappear.
Rachel Greer worked in product safety at Amazon and worried that the site was being flooded with untested and potentially unsafe products.
Are there proper warnings? Has it been safety tested for durability? If a child chews on it, will the paint come off? Is that paint leaded?
Most people would assume that there is a pretty high safety standard on Amazon.
And that assumption would be incorrect.
She says that's because Amazon, like other tech companies, takes the position that it's not legally responsible if its customers are harmed by products sold by third parties on the site.
If someone buys something that causes harm at Walmart or at Target, a consumer can sue Walmart or Target.
Right, because no one's forcing you when you come into Walmart to enter the doors of Walmart. They are making you sign away your rights.
But when do you sign that? When you go on Amazon.com?
When you make your account, you accept the terms and conditions.
People have been challenging Amazon's terms and conditions in court. Some have even been successful.
Ultimately, who's on the hook when a customer buys a dangerous product on Amazon? Who takes ultimate responsibility for that?
Well, in the rare case where something like that happens, if it's a third-party seller, the sale is by a third-party seller, and it is the seller's responsibility to sell a legitimate product to a customer. And then when Amazon is the retailer and we sell a product to a customer, then it's our obligation to make sure that we understand the manufacturer and the supply chain for that product and its safety.
But when the other sellers are selling in your store, you're not responsible for it ultimately if they're selling your customer a defective or dangerous product?
I think the way things work in the US is that the seller of record is the person who is setting the price and who is purchasing the product. And for things not sold by Amazon, and it says on the detail page, it'll tell you who the seller is. It's the seller's responsibility for those things. And for us, it's very clear. It says Amazon.com whenever we sell it.
Do you audit your sellers in terms of whether they're actually providing safe products to your customers?
We do. Some of our sales, so about almost 60% of our sales are by third parties. And those sales, some of them come directly from the third party. So we're not involved at all.
But you take a cut. I mean, it's on your infrastructure. It goes through Amazon.com. So, I mean.
Well, it's on our infrastructure in terms of the website and payments. But we're not.
And fees that, you're taking a cut of the sale,
Sure,
right?
Sure. And we're providing, traffic that, it's kind of the way they think about marketing is why they would pay that fee. But it's harder to, before an experience, inspect that product.
South Carolina woman who bought a hairdryer on Amazon said this happened.
Fire is coming out of the hairdryer.
Amazon's approach has had consequences.
A hoverboard caused a fire that destroyed their home.
Dangerous products were flagged by authorities in Washington state.
Found dozens of school supplies that had high levels of toxic metals.
And a recent report found thousands of banned, unsafe, or mislabeled products.
I'm having a hard time understanding something, which is that Amazon's entire brand is about the customer.
Yes.
Right? That it's.
I reminded them of this over and over again.
You reminded them of what?
It said that no customer wants to buy an unsafe product. No customer wants selection that harms their child. No customer wants to buy something that burns down their house because it looks cool and it's the latest, coolest thing.
Sitting here today, are you able to basically say that the products that you sell on Amazon.com are safe?
What I can say is we work really hard to make sure that they're safe. We've spent $400 million in the last year on systems that seek out things that are not safe. And, there are millions of sellers and hundreds of millions of products. And our job is to, as fast as we can, weed out the ones that don't belong on our site. We're going to have to be vigilant as a retailer and as a technology company. And we are definitely dedicated to protecting the safety of our customers.
We heard that concern for the customer over and over in our interviews with Amazon executives.
Customer trust in a company like Amazon is sort of foundational.
Customer obsession is the first leadership principle, and it's not a corporate slogan.
We try to stay really focused on customers.
Very focused on delivering results for our customers.
Providing a great customer experience that customers want.
Delivering that customer delight.
This commitment to the customer and to keeping prices low had another benefit. It helped them avoid running afoul of regulators who enforce the nation's antitrust laws.
It's important to understand sort of that there's two fundamental philosophies of antitrust, of anti-monopoly law. There's the traditional philosophy in which you want to break up all potential concentrations of power that you can, but for the last 30 years, there's been this change in how we do antitrust. And this is the idea that the only purpose of antitrust should be to drive prices lower to serve the interest of the consumer.
Lynn had been urging regulators to take a more traditional approach and examine whether the company was gaining market power in exploitative ways, stifling fair competition, but keeping prices low for consumers.
We live in a society of consumers, though, and seemingly there is some net benefit to all of us when prices are low. So what's wrong with that view of things?
It's obviously good for all people, if we can drive down prices, if we have lower priced drugs, if we have books that anybody could buy, that's a good thing. It's a good thing for society. And it's a good thing for us as consumers. But we're not only consumers, we're also citizens. We're also producers. We're also people who think and who make things and who grow things. And we want to have access to open markets.
Once again, the tension was most pronounced with book publishers. Amazon was selling around 40% of all new books in America and 2/3 of all electronic books, thanks to the success of the Kindle. Then one of the world's largest publishers, Hachette, decided to push back. Franklin Foer was one of its authors.
Hachette and Amazon set out to renegotiate their ebook contract. And Hachette said, no, we don't accept the terms of your contract. And Amazon basically said, to hell with you, Hachette. We're going to stop delivering your books. If somebody searches for a Hachette title, we're going to redirect them to another publisher.
Amazon's battle with Hachette and the authors that Hachette publishes is heating up.
As Bezos's virtual blockade dragged on for months,
A bitter 7-month standoff.
thousands of authors, including bestsellers like Douglas Preston, were caught in the middle.
Some authors were losing 50 to 90% of their sales from Amazon. It was absolutely devastating to first-time authors. It actually destroyed their careers.
Did you see your sales plummet?
I did. Yes, I saw my sales plummet tremendously.
In frustration, Preston penned an open letter on behalf of all authors. It was published in the New York Times with more than 900 signatures.
We authors have loved Amazon. We have enthusiastically supported it. And this is how they treat us. This is not right.
Amazon has been accused of doing everything from raising prices to deliberately delaying shipments.
Is this what happens when Jeff Bezos decides to flex the muscles?
While Hachette and Amazon were at an impasse, Douglas Preston, Franklin Foer, and other authors went to Washington and asked the Obama administration to open an investigation.
I went to the Justice Department and I went to the Federal Trade Commission with the Authors Guild, and we tried to explain to them why this power was so dangerous. We pointed out all the ways in which Amazon was bullying the publishing industry.
The Department of Justice listened to us, and their answer was essentially this. Amazon is one of the most popular companies in the country. They have brought tremendous services to consumers, and they've brought lower prices. And that we hadn't given them any kind of reason to open an antitrust investigation.
Eventually, Hachette and Amazon would settle their dispute, with Amazon allowing Hachette to set its own prices for ebooks, but offering it incentives to keep them low.
It's great to be here at Amazon.
Amazon would thrive during the Obama years and eventually account for nearly 40% of all online commerce in the country.
Last year, during the busiest day of the Christmas rush, customers around the world ordered more than 300 items from Amazon every second.
But the complaints about its tactics would continue, with retailers of all kinds concerned that Amazon had become the online shopping gatekeeper.
You've got to be on Amazon. You have to be there because that's where everyone is. That 100 million Prime subscribers. They are the de facto e-commerce channel in the United States, period. End of list.
Amazon executives have told us that there are many other options out there. There is Walmart, there's Alibaba. As a seller, you've got options.
I've heard that response from Amazon executives before, and we did that. We listed all of our products on every other online marketplace, but it's a testament to just how good Amazon is. All of the others that were non-Amazon combined did about 10% of what we were doing on Amazon.
Businesses big and small have been accumulating complaints about Amazon's hold on them.
On Amazon, the customer belongs to Amazon. It doesn't belong to the third-party seller. You're basically renting the Amazon customer.
James Thompson used to recruit brands to come onto Amazon and now advises them on how to do business with the company.
I represent brands today that face a number of challenges with Amazon.
Among those challenges, businesses say that Amazon has access to their valuable data, which gives it an unfair advantage. They also complain about increasingly higher fees to stay on the platform and pressure to use Amazon's warehouses and shipping services. We spoke to numerous name brand companies, but none would share its grievances on camera.
My account was suspended.
Some small business people have been talking about their experiences, good and bad, online.
When you're selling on Amazon, you're playing in someone else's playground.
Who gets placed where, whether or not your product shows up in the search results.
They suspended my account without warning.
These are all things that are governed by Amazon's rules. And if there's a dispute within that arena, if you feel you are mistreated, the judge and jury is Amazon.
They don't care. They'll just kill your account like that or suspend it.
There are all sorts of crazy stories about why people get their accounts shut down on Amazon. And it could take a week, it could take months, it could be never before you're back online again. Amazon has the upper hand and the ability to basically take your business away from you at any given moment.
Selling on Amazon, take one.
Amazon said third-party sellers account for more than half of everything sold on the site.
I sell mini longboards, skateboards.
I sell mineral water. This is what I do.
And it's committed to its sellers' success, proactively contacting them when their accounts are at risk of suspension and offering an appeals process to resolve disputes.
You already have great products. Scale up and reach.
But in the eyes of some businesses, Amazon has essentially become like the railroads at the turn of the last century that controlled the flow of commerce across the country.
Start selling today.
Do you see yourself as being kind of like the rails for e-commerce, that sellers bring their goods to market on your rails through your marketplace?
I don't think of it that way, and here's why. The vast majority of stuff all the stuff that's sold is manufactured, right? So it's manufactured, meaning there are brands and factories that produce stuff and then sell it. We're 1% of the retail sales in the world, about.
Well, you are the biggest marketplace online, right?
No, so again, I don't, the idea that there's an online distinct for brands to sell their stuff and distinct from physical just doesn't make sense to me. And we're far from the largest retailer. So I describe this as retail, and we're competing against Walmart and Target and Costco and Carrefour and Alibaba and Tmall and all kinds of folks who are now selling both physical stores and online.
In addition to pointing to other large retailers, inside the company, employees have been schooled in how to talk about its size and power.
When I worked at Amazon, we had training specifically on the use of terms like monopoly. We were not allowed to use a term like market share. Amazon has what's known as market segment share. What is market segment? What is market segment share? I don't know, but I know that the lawyers at Amazon feel that those terms are much safer than using terms like market share.
So market share was something they were really concerned about.
Clearly somebody with the necessary legal training or PR training recognized that Amazon was growing very quickly. And when we were asked to use the term market segment and market segment share, in essence, it's a polite way of saying, I'm not going to talk to you about how big we are.
Since leaving Amazon 20 years ago, Shel Kappan has been watching the company with increasing concern, and he's speaking out about it for the first time.
I think that the characterization of Amazon as being a ruthless competitor is true. And under the flag of customer obsession, they can do a lot of things which might not be good for people who aren't their customers.
I know you're not a legal scholar, but are you basically concerned that Amazon is a monopoly?
I'm concerned that it has that type of power. I think it, whether you technically can call it a monopoly or not, I don't know.
That question has continued to loom over Amazon.
I think that Amazon is looking out, and the existential threat that they may face is going to be from government. It's whether or not policymakers are going to step in and intervene and say, you have too much power.
For years, Bezos has been ramping up Amazon's profile in Washington.
Amazon has been lobbying the FAA to lift.
Trying to cozy up the politicians so that they will give him the biggest tax breaks around.
Spending millions a year on lobbying.
Amazon lobbied more government entities than any other tech company.
And hiring as its spokesman the former White House press secretary, Jay Carney.
You've got an army of lobbyists, many of whom have revolved in and out of government, including yourself. What are you hoping to get for all that lobbying spend and all that influence?
One of the things we discovered is because of the visibility of our company, but also the range of businesses that we're in, we need subject matter experts on food safety, on transportation, on drones, on privacy. And also, we can be a resource, an information provider to policymakers and regulators. That's not lobbying in the traditional sense in terms of trying to persuade somebody to do something. It's just answering questions and providing data and information.
Bezos himself would also become a presence in the capital, and eventually buy the largest private residence in town.
Jeff Bezos never really showed much interest in politics, but as he cemented himself in the city, he started to acquire this physical presence. He bought a mansion and developed it into a place that is explicitly designed to be social.
It has a big ballroom. I mean, it is designed to create a real presence for him in the nation's capital where he can hobnob with the people who make decisions.
He'd even bought the hometown newspaper,
Jeff Bezos sent a thunderbolt through the media world this week.
spending $250 million to rescue the struggling Washington Post.
And I do believe that democracy dies in darkness. I think that the capital city of the United States of America needs a paper like the Washington Post.
I got to say, full credit to him. He hasn't intervened in any of the coverage of the paper, and he's invested in the paper. Every dollar of profit that the paper makes is plowed back into making it a better paper.
Bezos allowed the Post to hire, to restock its newsroom. He reversed what had been an atmosphere of sort of decline. I'd say the Washington Post has really flourished under Bezos's ownership.
Let's cut this digital ribbon.
At the time, critics saw a more cynical motive.
Perhaps he's buying the Washington Post to buy some sort of protection. Precisely. This deal could give him more influence over politics.
Nobody hangs out in Washington, D.C. just to go to the free museums. You buy a home in Washington, you buy a newspaper in Washington because it is the most influential city in the world. You want to lay your hands on that power.
Bezos saw a business opportunity there as well. The Obama administration planned to modernize the federal government by embracing cloud computing. Bezos had been quietly building a revolutionary cloud computing business. He called it Amazon Web Services.
It's basically computing power in the cloud, but really it's Amazon server farms around the world that give people access to the kind of technology services they need.
To keep Amazon running, Bezos had developed an unprecedented digital infrastructure. He realized he could rent parts of it out, not just to businesses, but also to the government.
Our infrastructure is built to satisfy the security standards of the most risk-sensitive organizations.
He's already got a huge edge over the other big competitors in it. So he wants to take that lead and capture the US government.
In 2013, he got a major boost when it was revealed that Amazon Web Services had designed a computing cloud for the CIA.
Amazon Web Services was awarded a 10-year contract for $600 million.
Amazon is helping the CIA build a secure cloud computer network.
The CIA contract was probably one of the best things that happened to Amazon's cloud business. It lifted all doubts about the security of the cloud and whether you could trust Amazon with your most precious data.
The message to the world is if the CIA trusts Amazon with its data, then maybe other companies and government institutions can as well.
And they did.
Experience it with Expedia.
AWS became by far the world's leading cloud computing platform.
On CBS.
Today, more than 1 million businesses, as well as PBS, pay Amazon to store and manage their data. Bezos had again anticipated the next frontier in technology and had made himself indispensable to it.
What Jeff Bezos is after is really creating a company that is the infrastructure, that owns the infrastructure for how commerce is done. And that's an incredibly powerful place to be.
Please welcome Chief Executive Officer of Amazon Web Services, Andy Jassy.
Andy Jassy created and runs AWS. He credits the service with making it easier to do business and sparking innovation throughout the economy.
Look at what AWS has enabled with regard to change in our society. Look at Netflix changed the way that we consume digital content, and Airbnb changed the way that we get accommodations, and Ola and Grab and Lyft and Uber changed the way that we get transportation. AWS has been a part of enabling all of these huge innovations and changes in consumer experiences that have made life better for people.
And we're the cloud with the most capabilities, the most innovation, the most customers.
The division generated $35 billion in sales last year.
Amazon Web Services. Build on.
The success of AWS gave Bezos billions to expand Amazon from a company that sells everything to a company that does everything. A top priority
to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Was to create the sci-fi future he'd fallen in love with as a child.
Gentlemen, this computer has an auditory sensor. It can, in effect, hear sounds.
A world of artificial intelligence in which computers can think and make decisions for humans and about humans.
Jeff Bezos is a big fan of Star Trek. He admits that was on his brain when he came up with the idea that Amazon should be pursuing a little disk that you can bark commands into.
4.7 Stop. Photos.
This is his beam me up Scotty fantasy realized.
We started working on this device, and our vision was that in the long term, it would become the Star Trek computer.
When it first arrived from Amazon, I didn't know what it was.
In 2014, Bezos's talking computer, the Amazon Echo, hit the market.
Is it for me?
It's for everyone.
The voice known as Alexa would embed Amazon deeper into the lives of millions of people.
Alexa, what do you do?
I can play music, answer questions, get the news on weather.
They call it a personal assistant. And just that term implies this intimate connection that we then begin to develop with Amazon.
Alexa, sing the ABC song.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
I believe that when we think about the future and the future with artificial intelligence, given where we currently are today, Alexa in some ways represents the moment that it becomes seamlessly interwoven with our lives.
Alexa, how many teaspoons are in a tablespoon?
1 tablespoon equals 3 teaspoons.
And the problem is that we forget that it's there.
Alexa, lights on.
Okay.
But Alexa is also listening, and she's learning.
I'm answering questions and learning more.
And that helps Amazon in the race to dominate artificial intelligence.
Alexa. Every time you ask Alexa something, you're making the Alexa algorithm better. It's one of the reasons why Amazon, having had a head start, is able to kind of preserve that head start because they've got the most data of anyone.
Alexa is one more way for Amazon to gather extremely valuable data. And this data collection is extremely important to this business model. It's extremely hard to do. And, convincing people to just deploy something like this in their home is a brilliant trick.
Dave Limp is Amazon's head of devices.
How is it that you convinced tens of millions of people to put what is essentially a listening device in their homes?
Well, I would first disagree with the premise. It doesn't, it's not a listening device. The device in its core it has a detector on it. We call it internally a wake word engine. And that detector is listening, not really listening, it's detecting one thing and one thing only, which is the word you've said that you want to get the attention of that echo.
Once the device is awake and the blue light is on, it's recording. And last year, it was revealed that Amazon employs thousands of people around the world to listen and transcribe some of those recordings to help train the system.
Do you think that you did a good enough job of disclosing that to consumers, that there are humans involved in listening to these recordings?
We try to articulate what we're doing with our products as clearly as we can. But if I could go back in time and I could be more clear and the team could be more clear on how we were using human beings to annotate a small percentage of the data, I would, for sure. What I would say, though, is that once we realized that customers didn't clearly understand this, and within a couple days, we added an opt-out feature so that customers could turn off annotation if they so chose. And then within a month or two later, we allowed people to auto-delete data, which they also asked for within that time frame. You know, we're not going to always be perfect, but when we make mistakes, I think the key is that we correct them very quickly on behalf of customers.
But even one of the founders of Amazon Web Services approaches his Alexa devices with caution.
When do you turn off your Alexa?
I turn off my Alexa when I know for a fact that the conversation that I'm going to have, or whenever I just want to have a private moment. I don't want certain conversations to be heard by humans. Conversations that I know for a fact are not things that should be shared. Then I actually turn off those particular listening devices.
We have had an incredible year. Our team has invented a lot on behalf of customers, and I cannot wait to show you what we have.
So far, Limp and his team have made Alexa compatible with more than 100,000 products.
Echo Frames allow you to get done more around you and be more present in the everyday.
Now they're going to know more about you than anyone knows. They're trying to move as intimately as possible, as quietly as possible into everyday life.
Echo Loop is a smart ring packed with ways to stay on top of your day.
Amazon wants to have the entire environment essentially mic'd.
Alexa, start my running playlist.
They want your walk in the park. They want your run down the city street.
Nationwide's teamed up with Amazon to bring you the all-new Echo Auto.
They want what you do in your car. They want what you do in your home.
Amazon Smart Oven.
Alexa, bake for 30 minutes at 350 degrees.
All these intimacies, all this insight is being integrated, analyzed and integrated.
Alexa, alarm off.
That is an extraordinary kind of power that has never before existed.
After Alexa, Amazon would go on to spend nearly $1 billion to buy Ring,
Hey, bud, the police are on the way.
a doorbell camera and app that Amazon describes as the new neighborhood watch.
Hey, get away. Get out of here.
To promote it, Amazon has enlisted the help of hundreds of local police departments.
It's a phenomenal tool to assist detectives.
They give them access to a portal to request footage and have given free cameras to hand out and talking points.
This system is so simple to use and actually.
You have Amazon in partnership with police departments who have basically turned policemen into like Avon salespeople for Amazon Ring. They have given police departments talking points and marketing materials to encourage the installation of Ring by community residents. None of this was public knowledge.
And this is Ring's first indoor cam. It is cute, is what I would say.
Amazon has continued to expand the scope of Ring. Last fall, Dave Limp unveiled a version designed to monitor the inside of people's homes. Within weeks, hackers discovered a way to terrorize Ring customers.
Come on, can you say the magic word? I'm your best friend. I'm Santa Claus.
Did you see that video?
I did see that video.
What'd you think of it?
I think that that is an industry problem. It's not just about a Ring camera. It could be about anybody's cameras. It's about any device. In that, and we've already investigated that one to make sure what the root cause was. What we want to be able to do in those cases is we want to minimize them. We'd like to detect them, and we also want to build tools that give them the ability so that that makes it harder for those kinds of attacks to happen. There's a lot of bad people in this world.
Here's a device that you had described as cute and seems harmless, and I'm just wondering whether you're being straight with people about the attendant risks to your customers that you are obsessed with, supposedly.
Well, it's not supposedly. We are obsessed with customers. I would say that we are trying to build security features at every level of the stack. Operating systems, authentication, fraud detection. We offer things that customers can turn on that make it even harder for those attacks to happen.
Yo, what's up? How's your day?
Who is that?
What's going on, buddy? What are you watching?
There were a series of similar attacks across the country.
What's up, homie? I still see you. You hungry? What's going on, my main man, Shaq?
And it's not just hackers. Ring has fired some of its own employees for spying on customers.
In George Orwell's 1984, he describes a dystopia in which you had to live, you did live, from habit that became instinct, in the assumption that every sound you made was overheard. And I wonder if you ever think about how easily this could become dystopian to some degree.
Well, I don't want to live in that world. So I do not want to invent the technology that, or have my teams invent the technology that would create that world. And so, but I am an optimist. I think if you take the absolute view of that, we wouldn't invent anything.
We're increasingly living in a world in which your products and your designs are there. Can you see how it could be concerning in some ways that we all can't opt out of that world at this point?
Sure, I can see why it could be concerning to some customers. Our job in building that technology is to build it in such a way that it takes into account for the scenarios that you just talked about as best as we possibly can. The reality of it is that world, it happened way before Ring or Alexa.
That's something that Bezos himself wrestled with 20 years ago.
I believe that privacy is going to be one of the prominent issues of the 21st century. I think there are towns now in the United States that have installed security cameras on every corner, and their crime rates decreased by 80%, but you really want cameras on every corner. There are very strange things that are going to happen over the next 100 years with respect to technology that are going to challenge us as a society to figure out how we want to deal with privacy. So that's
Decades later, Bezos would be at the vanguard of expanding the use of that kind of technology.
Introducing Amazon Rekognition Video.
Rekognition allows you to pass an image to us. You can say, do these two faces match, which is incredibly useful for applications in the security space. You can imagine unlocking your...
After Amazon rolled out a facial recognition tool, it marketed it to law enforcement.
Recognize and track persons of interest from a collection of tens of millions of faces.
Police we've spoken to say it's a valuable tool to identify suspects quickly.
Appears to be a match, but I'm going to make sure I look at them all.
And while Amazon has offered guidelines for how it should be used, there are few laws governing the use of this technology.
It returns anybody with warrants that look like her.
Civil liberties advocates have raised concerns, as have computer scientists, who worry Amazon has released the software before it's ready, and that police are essentially field testing it on the public on behalf of the company.
The tools are not what I call battle tested, and we still do not understand how well they work in the environments in which they'll be applied. That's where I see a danger.
Anima Anand Kumar was the principal scientist for artificial intelligence at Amazon. In her first interview about her concerns, she told us she was particularly alarmed by an MIT study that found the software prone to mistakes with darker-skinned faces. Amazon has questioned the study's methodology.
As a researcher in AI, I feel it's my personal responsibility to educate the public of where AI truly is today, right? Because they hear so much of AI being hyped up, it's supposed to be magical, it's supposed to solve all the world's problems. I see the potential in doing that, but at the same time, we need a reality check. We need to ask, where is AI today? What can it truly do well?
And when it comes to facial recognition, you don't think it's ready for prime time?
I don't think face recognition is ready for prime time in challenging applications like law enforcement.
Anand Kumar and other scientists have asked Amazon to stop selling recognition to law enforcement because they say the system's accuracy is still in question, and there are no clear regulations about how it's used. We asked Andy Jassy about it.
I have a different view, and we spent we've had the facial recognition technology out for use for over 2.5 years now. And in those 2.5 years, we've never had any reported misuse of law enforcement using the facial recognition technology. And I think a lot of societal good is already being done with facial recognition technology. Already you've seen hundreds of missing kids reunited with their parents and hundreds of human trafficking victims saved and all kinds of security and identity and education uses. So there's a lot of good that's been done with it. But I also understand that it could be misused. And I think at the end of the day, with any technology, whether you're talking about facial recognition technology or anything else, the people that use the technology have to be responsible for it. And if they use it irresponsibly, they have to be held accountable.
There's been all sorts of problems with policing in this country. So why allow police departments to experiment?
We believe that governments and the organizations that are charged with keeping our communities safe have to have access to the most sophisticated modern technology that exists. We don't have a large number of police departments that are using our facial recognition technology. And as I said, we've never received any complaints of misuse. Let's see if somehow they abuse the technology. They haven't done that. And to assume that they're going to do it, and therefore you shouldn't allow them to have access to the most sophisticated technology out there, doesn't feel like the right balance to me.
It's been difficult to even know how many police departments are using the facial recognition technology. And there's no public auditing to know whether there are complaints about abuse. How would the public ever know?
Again, I don't think we know the total number of police departments that are using facial recognition technology. I mean, you can use any number. We have 165 services in our technology infrastructure platform, and you can use them in whatever conjunction, any combination that you want. We know of some, and the vast majority of those that are using it according to the guidance that we prescribe. And when they're not, we have conversations. And if we find that they're using it in some irresponsible way, we won't allow them to use the service and the platform.
Andy Jassy and Jeff Bezos have said they want governments to hurry up and regulate how law enforcement can use facial recognition. But in the meantime, Amazon has forged ahead and has even discussed its services with Immigration and Customs Enforcement
At Amazon Web Services, we are
and the U.S. military.
community to deliver for our warfighters and defense leaders for when it matters most.
Bezos himself has made it clear that he sees Amazon playing a critical role in national security, as well as in commerce.
We are going to continue to support the DoD, and I think we should. And if big tech companies are going to turn their back on the U.S. Department of Defense, this country is going to be in trouble.
As Amazon has revolutionized one industry after another, Jeff Bezos' reputation has grown to mythic proportions.
You've called what Jeff Bezos has built a miracle.
Absolute miracle. I wish I could give him a blood test or something so I could pick it out. But
you want to clone him?
In fact, no, I want a transfusion, actually.
Amazon is now worth $1 trillion, just 1 month.
His every move moves the markets.
Amazon advertising is just on fire.
Starting a digital advertising business to rival Facebook and Google.
Some breaking news on Whole Foods.
Holy
Jim, I
cow.
heard you gasp just now.
Holy cow, this is such a game changer.
Buying the grocery chain Whole Foods.
In a record-breaking deal, Amazon is buying Whole Foods for $13.7 billion.
The day the acquisition was announced, the nation's largest grocery company lost billions of dollars
because Amazon acquired a company 1/12 the size.
Everybody thinks Bezos is the smartest person in the world and he's going to come and crush me.
When Amazon announced the acquisition of PillPack,
News of the deal sent shock
Mm.